Hi everyone, it's Dr. Maureen O'Hara, and I'm going to go over punctuation and grammar in APA style. Switch. Okay. So I've arranged this in alphabetical order, and it follows the order of the writing guide that's posted in the course content area. So we are using the APA Manual 6th edition, and I'm going to start with abbreviations. So the rule is that you abbreviate a term the first time it's used, even if it's in the in-text citation. So if I were going along and I hadn't used World Health Organization in the sentence yet, then I could spell it out here and then put the abbreviation in brackets, because we can't have parentheses inside parentheses. So here, if I were going along with my sentence here, then I can abbreviate World Health Organization, and I can use it for a citation, so get more bang for my buck there with that abbreviation in the citation. Otherwise, you just abbreviate as you're going along. Do not explain an abbreviation in a title or a heading, and after the first time it's been explained, just keep using the abbreviation. If you're only going to use a term less than 4 times, consider spelling it out each time. Abbreviations are used because they save space, but just because you can abbreviate doesn't mean that you have to abbreviate, and too much alphabet soup is confusing for your reader. There are some abbreviations that are considered words in the dictionary and do not need any explanation. This is an incomplete list. This is all I could think of off the top of my head. So if you look up US, for example, it'll say abbreviation for United States. So if it has abbreviation next to it, then you have to spell it out the first time. If you look up MRI, it's going to say noun next to it, so then you don't need to explain it. You can just use the abbreviation as a word. With Latin abbreviations, they can only be used in parentheses. Otherwise, you have to spell out what they mean. And when you use them in parentheses, they have a comma that goes with them. In APA style, the apostrophe is only used to indicate possession. So when you have a singular noun, you're going to add apostrophe S to it. So the root word is singular. You're just going to add apostrophe S. When the word is plural, you're just going to add apostrophe to the already pluralized word. And then if you have a list of people that are possessing something, then the last person in the list is the one that gets the apostrophe S. And just remember that the word that's doing the possessing must have something to possess, like Mary's lamb, New Year's Eve. There's always something that is being possessed by the possessor. And we do not use apostrophes to make a word plural. You just add S, and there are no contractions allowed in APA style. So the only use for the apostrophe in APA style is to make possession. Okay, colons are only used at the end of a complete sentence. Just because you have a list does not automatically mean that you can use the colon. So I have 2 examples here. There is only one choice for the use of the colon at the end of a complete sentence. This is a complete sentence up to here. I could put a period there and it would still make sense. So that's why I can use a colon there. If I wanted to say the basket included, I couldn't put a colon here because if I put a period there, it wouldn't make sense. But if I add these magic words, the following, that now I have an object for my sentence, and then I can use the colon, and then I can put in the list. And if the phrase following the colon is a complete sentence, then you will capitalize the first word. There are many uses for commas. There's like about 20 uses for comma. This is a nice book that has a lot of, it's not complete, but it has almost all of them in it. It's only $5.95, so I really recommend it. I'm only going to go over about the top 10 uses of commas that would probably be the ones that you're going to be using in your writing. So the first one is called a serial comma. When you have a list of 3 or more items, it's called elements in a series, and so therefore that's why it's called a serial comma. So we always put in the comma before the conjunction and the last item. We use a comma before the main part of a sentence with an introductory phrase. The introductory phrase is giving us some extra information before the sentence even gets started, so that's why it's important to separate that from the main part of the sentence. So one thing you can notice is that we expect the subject of the sentence to be the first words of the sentence, so if they're not, we need to separate whatever comes before the first words of the sentence with the comma. And don't forget about these if-then constructions. If is an introductory phrase, then precedes the complete thought or the sentence. So one common use for the comma is with a conjunction and 2 complete sentences. So I like ice cream is a complete sentence. My favorite flavor is chocolate chip is also a complete sentence. I want to join those together. I'm going to use the comma with the conjunction. If the phrase that follows the conjunction is not a complete sentence, then no comma. So this is how I would construct it if I wanted to have 2 complete sentences, and this is how I would construct it without 2 complete sentences. I like ice cream is complete, but other desserts is not. So you have a decision tree when you have conjunctions and commas. First question you should ask yourself is it a list of 2 things or 3 or more things? If the answer is no, then no comma. If the answer is yes, list of 3 or more things, then you can use the comma. Second question is, do you have 2 complete sentences on either side of and? If the answer is no, like here, no comma. If the answer is yes, like here, then you use a comma. We use commas with relative pronouns. These are the most common, which, that, and who. Which and that are used for things, and who is used with people. And the relative pronoun which is used to set off non-essential information, meaning it could be removed from the sentence and the sentence would still make sense. That is used to introduce phrases that are considered essential for the sentence, meaning if the phrase was removed, the sentence would not make sense. So that's why I have the book is on the table, but by saying which was written last year is giving me some extra information about it to clarify which book I'm talking about. And then also I could say this book is the one that was written last year. So having that was written last year gives me information about which book. With who, depending if the information is essential or non-essential, will determine whether a comma is used. I would say 90% of the time it's essential information, therefore no comma. So the boy who was in class went home. How do I know whether to use who or whom? So if you can substitute he or him, and depending which one makes sense is going to guide you. So for my example here, he was in class, that makes sense, so I'm going to use who. If I say him was in class, that doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to use whom. The bell tolls for whom. So if I say the bell tolls for he, it doesn't make sense. But if I say the bell tolls for him, it makes sense. And then notice how him and whom both have M's at the end of them. And so that's another way you can remember that. All right, we use commas for what I call the interrupters, and these can be at the end of a sentence or in the middle of a sentence. Usually these are descriptive phrases or phrases with examples. So in this case, all of these are examples. So that's why I have a comma with such as. Including is a very common phrase that we use with examples. In this case, it's at the end of the sentence, and in this sentence, it's in the middle of the sentence. So that's why we need the comma here. Otherwise, I would say, I like ice cream and other desserts, but now I'm giving you some extra information there, so I'm giving an example. However is another interrupter phrase. So with however, the use of the commas is when you do not have complete sentences on either side. So in this case, I don't have a complete sentence on either side of however, so I'm going to use the commas. Same is true for therefore and some other of those transition words. So we have these participial phrases, or I call them the ing phrases, that are descriptive. And so we use commas with those. So flowing down her back is describing the raven black hair. Including jewelry is describing the treasures, and then which her mother gave her is even describing a little further. We also use commas with complete dates and complete locations. So if I just said was in Los Angeles, then I wouldn't have a comma here. But because I have Los Angeles, California, I'm going to put the comma here. It's not true for the two-letter abbreviation for the state. No comma with that. I don't know why there's a difference, but there is. We use commas with adjectives, and I just wanted to point out that there is an order to the adjectives. So how do you know whether you need a comma or not? So you need to decide if the adjectives are describing each other or if they're describing the noun. So in this case, light and blue is the color, so they're describing each other. Raven black is also describing each other. So both of these together are describing hair. Both of these together are describing eyes. Randomized is describing clinical trials, so that's why there's no comma there. Dark green paint, same idea. But for these last two, both of these adjectives are individually describing the noun. So I can have a round ball, I can have a red ball. So if you can put and in between here and it makes sense, then you need the comma. So round and red ball, that makes sense, so I need a comma. Vague and incomplete answer, so I need a comma here. So each one, vague answer, incomplete answer, each one is describing the noun individually. We use commas with contrasting phrases, and these are some common ones that we use. The comma comes before the phrase. Now in this case, Princess Elizabeth was afraid of the dragon but was brave anyway. Normally I would not have a comma here because the phrase after but is not a complete sentence. But in this case, because afraid and brave are opposites, they're contrasting, I'm going to have a comma there. So these are some contrasting phrases here as well. And we just can put them at the end of the sentence. They can be in the middle of the sentence. Then we have these other constructions with kind of absolute phrases, they're called. The greater the risk, the more satisfying the result. Neither one of them makes sense alone, but they make sense together, so that's the reason why there's a comma. Generally speaking, we do not use commas with prepositional phrases or adverbs. Only when another rule supersedes the comma is when we would use the comma in those cases. But of course there's always exceptions to the rules, and these are adverbs, especially, particularly, respectively, specifically. There's others, but these are the common ones. And these phrases are set off with commas, whether they're at the end of the sentence or in the middle of the sentence. All right, then there are places where we do not use commas, and one place is with a subordinating conjunction. These are connectors that do not use a comma, and there's 102 of them, and I didn't bother to memorize them all, but here's an impartial list. So when they're used in the middle of the sentence to connect what's called a dependent phrase, these can be complete or incomplete sentences, but usually do not make sense by themselves without the main sentence. So these are connectors without commas. Then we have these correlative phrases, either or, neither nor, not only but also, and these do not use commas either. And then some other phrases that we use frequently: included but was not limited to, does not have commas. And then one group compared with another does not have a comma here with compared. It's compared with and not compared to. And then school was closed due to the hurricane. Due to is considered a prepositional phrase, and that's why there's no comma there. All right, capitalization. We all know that we capitalize the first word of the sentence in proper nouns. So we capitalize brand names but not generic names. We capitalize the name of instruments but not theories or models. So instruments are used to collect data. So anything that you would hand to a patient or a client or a participant to gather some information would be capitalized. Geographical locations are capitalized, so pretty much anything on a map. We would say New York City, but we don't capitalize City of New York. And then these are other geographical locations. We capitalize those. We do capitalize Generation X, but not millennials and baby boomers. We capitalize races and ethnicities, and in APA style we capitalize black and white. Other styles do not, so that's why you'll see it in the literature not capitalized, but APA does capitalize them. And then we capitalize a word with a numeral, so type 2 diabetes, step 1, level 3, day 5, all of those are going to be capitalized. We do not capitalize the seasons of the year or directions on a map. And we do not capitalize the names of diseases or conditions unless they're named after somebody or some place. And we do not capitalize occupations, only if it's in conjunction as the title of a person's name. And we do not capitalize words that are not proper nouns that are going to be abbreviated. Okay, elements in a series, so I alluded to this earlier. Elements in a series are a list of 3 or more items. And in APA style, we use these little letters for enumeration for clarity. So you don't automatically have to enumerate every list of 3 or more things, only if it will be an aid to making it more clear for the different groups for the reader. So I just did some arbitrary ones here. The reason why I enumerated this one is because I'm separating each of these groups with a semicolon, and so that way it's absolutely clear where these groups begin and end. Sorry about my dog there. Okay, if you have statistical information or some complicated information, then even though it may not have semicolons, it's just separated with commas, then it is useful to use the enumeration to show the reader where the groups begin and end. So you don't need enumeration for a simple list. Okay, if you want to emphasize something, the only 2 ways to do it in APA style is to use italics or quotation marks. We can't use bold, underlining, or full caps. Okay, sorry about the interruption again. So when you introduce a term, whether you use quotation marks or italics, you only use the quotation marks or italics the first time, and then after that you just use the word. Okay, paragraphs in a series is a handy way to do some enumeration. So the elements in the series with the little letters is a horizontal display of information. It's only used in sentences. So if you have longer phrases or complete sentences, then the paragraphs in a series are very helpful. And the word paragraph is used very loosely. Paragraph can be one word, it can be an incomplete phrase, it can be a complete sentence or more than one sentence. So these paragraphs in a series are formatted like sentences and like a paragraph, so we're going to have Arabic numerals, put a period, space twice, and then you're going to capitalize the first word like the first word of a sentence would be. You're going to put some kind of sentence ending punctuation like a period here at the end. And then we use the hanging indent in order to make all these sentences line up under each other. And normally we use a hanging indent with 1/2 inch, but in this case you need to use 1/4 inch so that all of these will line up together. It's very handy for definition of terms, for conclusions, for steps in a process, for those kind of things. So here I've got my first term, the first word's capitalized, I've got a period at the end, I'm going to put in my text, I'm going to put in my citation, and I've got a period at the end. So here I've got a longer one where I've got overflow, and so that's where these will line up. So it's a handy tool to have. The other thing that's nice about it is that you don't have to speak in complete sentences. You can use incomplete phrases. All right, bullets is another way of doing some vertical enumeration, and they're only used in 2 specific cases. One is with the order when it makes a difference, like older, middle, younger. And the second time is when you already have paragraphs in a series and you want to do some enumeration under the paragraphs, then you can use the bullets for that. If you want to make 2 points, there's only 2 ways to do it. Either you just list the 2 points in the sentence, or you can use paragraphs in a series. APA does not allow for using the little letters for enumeration for 2 things. It has to be 3 or more things. And the APA does not use Arabic numerals. So the only way you can use Arabic numerals is to list them vertically here. Okay, hyphens, dashes, and slashes. The rules for hyphens are on pages 97 to 100 in the book. It's 3 pages of rules. I don't suggest memorizing it. Just fold over that page so you can go back to it. A hyphen is 1, and it indicates that the words on either side have equal weight. A dash is 2 hyphens, and then when you press the space bar, it smooths out. And we use dashes in English composition, but in scientific writing we don't use dashes. The only place that it's used is in the reference list to separate a title from a subtitle. And then we can't use a hyphen in the body of the paper with a range. You have to spell out 2. And then there's no spaces between hyphens, dashes, and slashes. They have to touch the words on either side. So some of the common uses for a hyphen is when we have combinations that we use as adjectives. It can be more than 2 words. So in this case I've got face-to-face class, part-time job, 12-year-old girl, well-dressed man. But when the words are following usually the verb and don't have any noun to modify, then there's no hyphens. So I don't know why it's one way before the noun and no hyphens after the noun, but that's English for you. Here's some combinations that you see frequently. Web-based, evidence-based medicine, related is another word. Another combination is a noun with a verb. We do that frequently. And then there are some words that are hyphenated all the time, like mother-in-law, on-site, all words with self, and when we have vowels back-to-back. And then we don't use hyphens with ly words, so even though I want to put one there very badly, no hyphen there. And then we don't use them with what is called superlatives and comparatives, so better written paper, higher scoring students. And we don't use the hyphen with fractions that are used as nouns. We use it when they're used as adjectives. So 2/3 is describing majority, but 1/3 is being used as a noun here. Okay, noun-pronoun agreement. Nouns and pronouns must agree in number. So if you know the gender, then use the gender. If you don't, then you can say his or her, or you can use the his/her. They, them, and their. Oh, the computer did that for me. Thank you so much, computer. Let me go back here. It fixed this for me. So let me fix that right now. Thank you so much. Have to be used, so they, them, and their have to be used with plural nouns. So the students brought their books. And university is singular, so we're going to use its for that. But when you have more than one university, you can use their. Okay, we do spell out numbers 0 to 9. Starting with 10, you can use the numeral. And we do spell out fractions 0 to 9. We know that we cannot start a sentence with a numeral. You have to spell it out. And then there are 4 exceptions to the rule that where we can use the numerals all the time. And one is with age, the other is time, the next one is units of measure, and the last one is scores, like Likert scores. So here I've got time, 5 years, 3 months, 6 miles. This is a unit of measure. This is time. This could be age also. But in this case, the 2 hour is being used as an adjective, so that's why I'm going to spell this out. But starting with 10, I can use the number. So that's the difference between these two. And participants are not age, time, unit of measure, or a score. So I'm going to have to spell out 5 here, even though that looks funny. That is correct. And then we do not mix numerals and words for symbols. So we can use the symbol with the numeral all the time. And in the case of percentage, then if you're starting the sentence with a numeral, then you have to spell out the word. So you can't use the word with the numeral. It has to be the symbol with the numeral or the word. So a paragraph is more than one sentence. I think English teachers would say that it's probably 3 to 5 sentences. But if you're using a lot of subheadings, sometimes it's difficult to come up with 3 or more sentences. So I'm going to make a rule that a paragraph is more than one sentence, so 2 sentences would be okay. Periods. We use periods with no spaces. We use them with 1 space and 2 spaces. So no periods or spaces are used with abbreviations. So Washington, D.C. doesn't have any periods there. And we use no spaces, but we use the periods with these Latin abbreviations. And we use 1 space between initials, whether it's in the body of the paper or the reference list. And we use 2 spaces between sentences. And remember, with US, there's a distinction made whether it's a noun or an adjective. So a noun, like the country, like FL is the abbreviation for Florida, CA is the abbreviation for California. So US, when you mean the country, no periods. But when you have US being used as an adjective, then you're going to put in the periods. But remember, with United States, either way, it has to be spelled out the first time. Okay, prepositions are used to connect nouns and pronouns to each other. Generally speaking, they do not use commas. And prepositions can indicate place, time, direction, and we have these other prepositions that we use. So on means one thing is in contact with something else, such as on the table. So the substitute words are about, for, and of. So we can say the book was about biology instead of the book was on biology. And the participant was able to use expressive language after the social story intervention was given to signify when help was needed. So no commas are needed with any of the prepositions or adverbs. Quotation marks are used with titles of articles and with quoted material, and the periods and commas go on the inside. This is an in-text citation where there's no author. And here's quoted material. So I'm going to have the period on the inside. If I had a citation for this, then I have permission to move the period from the end of the quotation to the end of the sentence. So just a word of caution. I know the author can write. I want to know what you know. So be prepared to paraphrase as much as you can. Semicolons. I already showed you how they're used with elements in a series when one of the groups already contains commas. So here's some examples with and without the enumeration. So you see you don't have to have the enumeration here, it just makes it more clear for the reader. The second place is when you have more than one citation in the parentheses. So instead of having them back to back, we're going to use the semicolon to separate them. And just as a note, when you have more than one, we put them in alphabetical order. The other place is if I'm writing my sentence and then I have United States and I want to have an abbreviation, I can put in the abbreviation and I can separate that from the citation with the semicolon. And then the other common place that we use semicolons, of the three places that we use them, is to separate two complete sentences that are closely related. So here's my choice. I can have two complete sentences. I can join them with a comma and a conjunction, or I can have a semicolon. So those are the only ways that you can punctuate complete sentences. However, we have transition words. So however, otherwise, nevertheless, therefore are common ones. And so what happens is that we use the semicolon to separate the two complete sentences. Now this transition word becomes the introductory phrase for the second sentence. So that's why I have a semicolon here and I have a comma here. All right, spelling. The authority is the Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary 11th edition, which you can use the hard copy or the online version. And if you look up healthcare, it's 2 words in the dictionary. World Wide Web is capitalized, and then when we used derivations of the name, you may have to look these words up. I looked all these words up. So if you look up website, it's capitalized and it's 2 words. But webcam and webinar are 1 word and they're not capitalized, and web page is 2 words and web is capitalized. Internet is a proper noun because the person who invented the word decided to spell it that way. Online is 1 word, it's not hyphenated. You give your regards to Broadway, otherwise you only have 1 regard. And please spell the name for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention correctly. It's more than 1 center. Same thing for the National Institutes of Health. It's more than 1 institute. And then we use though, get, through, and behind when we're speaking to one another. It's called colloquial speak. But when we're writing, we want to be more formal, so use although instead of though. Instead of get, try to think of another word like have, receive, obtain, contract. Instead of using this slang abbreviation, spell it out. And then with behind, behind means location, that one thing is behind the other. So when you mean the reasoning behind, you can change it to for, or supporting would be another word. Looks at is how we talk to each other. Maybe you can use evaluate or assess. And instead of on how, use about. Feedback, training, literature, research, and search are all singular nouns, and they do not have a plural form. Same thing with training. There's no plural form to training. So if you need a plural form, you need to add a word here that is a noun that's plural so that training becomes an adjective. And then I just want to remind you that curriculum is singular, curricula is plural. If you look up curriculum in the dictionary, there is a plural form with curriculums, but you'll sound smarter if you use curricula. PowerPoint presentation is the way Microsoft named its product. So PowerPoint is an adjective and it needs to be with a noun. So PowerPoint presentation, PowerPoint slides, PowerPoint technology, can't use PowerPoint by itself. Just want to remind you that bacteria, data, criteria, and phenomena are all plural. They're Latin words that are the plural forms, and they take plural verbs. Impact is a noun and not a verb, so the substitute verbs are affected or influenced. And then affect and effect are difficult for people. Generally speaking, affect is a verb and effect is a noun, but either one can be verbs, so you have to figure out the context. Then we have these collective nouns and countable nouns. Some of them are singular and take singular verbs and pronouns. Common ones are jury, staff, and faculty. So if you need them to be plural, then you need to change these to be adjectives and have a word that can be pluralized. So sugar, jewelry, and furniture are not countable, so they take singular verbs and pronouns. And then there are some nouns that look plural, but they take singular verbs. So usually the non-countable things are like ideas, and the countable ones are things that can be counted. Okay, subordinating conjunctions, I alluded to those a little earlier. They are connectors that do not use commas. They cannot be used with a comma in the middle of the sentence. And I just want to point out that as well as cannot be used as a substitute for and in a list of things. If you have a list of things, you need to use and. Since refers to an interval of time, like since I was born or since 1984. The substitute word is because. And while means at the same time, so the substitute words are although, and, or but. So that's on page 83 and 84 in the book. This and that, these and those are adjectives, and they need a noun to go with them, or you need to replace them with a phrase. Do not use this as the subject of a sentence. Try to come up with something else that you can use to be more precise. For verbs, we use the past tense for something that's over and done. So like the study that Jones did is over and done. So we can say Jones indicated a correlation. Use the present tense for something that started, the present perfect tense for something that started in the past and continues in the present. So what does that mean? So present perfect is we use these helper verbs with these ing verbs. And then if something is true in the present that was true in the past, then we use the present tense. And then I just want to remind you about the conditional tense. We use were is the to be verb whether the subject is singular or plural. So if I were a rich man from Fiddler on the Roof, that's going to be plural whether, even though I is singular. Okay, what should only be used to ask a question? Try not to use what as a placeholder because then you're requiring the reader to supply the meaning for what. Try to be more precise if you possibly can. So I've got some examples here. Instead of what the participants were trying to convey, you can say the information the participants were trying to convey. What was called corruption, you can say so-called corruption. What is best, the best course of action. What the patient wants, the patient's wishes. Okay, so that's all I have. There are more things than I covered in this presentation, so if you have any specific questions, be sure to call me or email me so that I can give you some individualized attention. Otherwise, I do appreciate your time, and thank you for attending my presentation.